Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Alex, for inviting me. It is a privilege to be here with so many experienced mediators and speakers. I was asked to talk about the recent developments in the European Union in the field of a consumer redress, online dispute resolution, and alternative dispute resolution. This sector, this economic sector is quite significant. If we take into account the consumer spending in the European Union amounts for around 57% of the GDP. So this is a significant sector, and it is believed that promoting ADR and online ADR, online dispute resolution, it would increase and enhance in this case, the internal market, European market, but also domestic markets, making them more competitive. I'm teaching, I'm an academic at the University of Leicester. I'm doing a little bit of teaching, given that I have got some research projects. One of them is in partnership with 4 other European universities, and it is on online mediation for civil and consumer disputes. It's been financed by the European Commission. We have 2 years to do this project, I am in charge of finding out how much online mediation for civil and commercial disputes are being used in the UK. This information is a bit tricky to find, so I would be grateful if some of you have information and could get back to me by perhaps email or a phone call. You'll find my details at the University of Leicester website, the law school. I've also got some funding from Nuffield Foundation, and I am investigating on consumer redress and how this is moving online in Spain, UK, and Italy. And as a result, in the next 2 years and a half, I'm going to teach 5 hours of teaching in the whole next 2 years and a half, and I have 2 hours this afternoon, so I will have to dash after lunch. I'm gutted at this coincidence. Anyways, moving on. What I want to talk about briefly is about this new European framework for consumer disputes, the ADR Directive 2013-11, which will be implemented by July next year across the European Union in all the member states, and the audio regulation, which will be implemented 6 months later. I've been involved, I worked as a consultant for the European Commission when they were drafting the proposals together with 2 other professors, one from London, one from Spain. So moving on to the content of this directive, the directive requires all member states to ensure that they have available ADR and ODR mechanisms to resolve all type of consumer contractual disputes. Let me emphasize that this is not making the use of ADR compulsory, but it requires all the governments in the European Union to ensure that all the sectors are covered. The main goals of this directive is to ensure that it is to fill the gaps. There are certain sectors in the UK, for instance, where there are not any ADR schemes which deal with certain types of consumer disputes, notably, airlines, for instance. This is the scope of application. There is an exception for this obligation, is that it does not include disputes brought by businesses against consumers, but does not impede the creation of these mechanisms, as well as disputes related to health services and public providers of higher education, universities, for instance, public universities, which already have ADR schemes, but under different type of regulation. So, more importantly, and this is the kind of the hope of the European Commission or the European Union, is that it will increase awareness and the systems of these mechanisms, particularly because the directive will require traders who are legally required already to opt in an ADR scheme, for instance, all financial institutions are in the UK are required to be part of the FOS, the Financial Ombudsman Service. They require all the traders and businesses who are legally required or who have voluntarily opting into an ADR schemes, like in the UK would be, travel agents which opted to APTA, the British Association for Travel Agents, that they are required to opt into a mediation and arbitration scheme to resolve any disputes with their customers. So either whether they're legally required or whether they are committed to use ADR, they will have to notify consumers in their terms and conditions as well as on their websites. But perhaps more importantly, and this is a bit of a gamble, it will require all businesses, all traders in the European Union to notify consumers when they have a dispute which they were unable to resolve it with the consumer, the existence of these mechanisms, of these ADR bodies or schemes, and whether or not the trader will participate in these schemes. The idea is that you could encourage traders to opt in voluntarily in these schemes. And also all businesses that are operating online, they will be required to have a link to an online dispute resolution platform that will be managed by the European Commission, which is regulated by the ODR regulation, which I will speak in a couple of minutes. But interestingly, only the coverage of the applicability and coverage of these ADR schemes or entities, they will have to ensure that they will comply with a number of procedural standards or quality criteria, which are fleshed out in the ADR directives, Articles 6 to 11, and with different headings. Article 6 talks about that in order to get this certification, which will be provided by a national a competent authority, will be a public body, will have to comply with the principle of independence, impartiality, and expertise of the third neutral parties and the ADR entity. They will have to ensure certain comply with certain criteria related to transparency, provide information about their procedures, effectiveness. They will have to resolve all disputes within 90 days, fairness. They will have to allow parties to get legal representation if they require so, and more perhaps controversially, before parties agree, the consumer and a trader agree to a settlement, they will have to notify the consumer that the consumer could get a better deal by, for instance, going through an adjudicative body. Liberty, meaning that fairness, well, there is a number of safeguards, which I will refer to in the next slide. Liberty, which requires that if parties opt to arbitration, to an arbitration scheme, the consumer has to decide to go to arbitration after the dispute has arisen. Legality, the mandatory consumer law has to be complied with in adjudicative schemes. And all these criteria will be monitored by certified ADR bodies. So any of you who will be interested in to deal with this type of disputes, which will not have to be necessarily of low value, many consumer disputes are of low value, but some of them could be of significant value. They will have to participate or to work for an ADR entity who have got the certification. So moving on from those legal principles, if you like, and what they mean in practice is that an ADR scheme or body who seeks to obtain this European certification will have to provide their services for free or for low value to consumers, obviously not to the traders who are likely to foot most of the bill. There is a number of criteria in terms of ensuring their independence. Their budget cannot be linked exclusively by the trader. As I mentioned earlier, the complaints have to be resolved within 90 calendar days, can only reject complaints on a number of tax-active numerous clauses grounds, such as in the case of a vexatious or frivolous complaint, when the complaint has already been addressed by another certified ADR entity. They will have to notify. Sorry to put a very, lots of words in the slide, but I think this, this is really the key, one of the main key points that are necessary to comply in order to obtain this European certification. They will have to allow consumers to submit disputes within a year since the dispute has arisen. And most importantly, relevant for this forum, and perhaps the most challenging element, I believe, is that they will have to deal with all the complaints online or offline. So anyways, they will have all the ADR entities that are certified, they will have to operate as an online dispute resolution mechanisms. The directive applies, by the way, I should have said this earlier, applies to both domestic and cross-border disputes. And importantly, they will have to provide their services both online and offline. They'll have to cooperate with relevant enforcement bodies like the CPC, allow each party to see and comment on the evidence and documents submitted by the other party. They must have all certified entities, ADR bodies or schemes. They must have a link to the online dispute resolution platform, which I'll speak to it about it in the next slide. And that will operate as also the platform to enable parties to communicate at a distance. And finally, and this is an element which obviously, as you can guess, the Commission is quite keen on, they must report information when they interact through the audio platform. They have to input information about, for instance, the outcome of the cases that they have received through the platform. But also, all certified ADR schemes, they must publicize their annual activity and develop or draft 2 yearly reports and submit it to the competent authority. Before I talk about the online dispute resolution regulation, just to briefly mention that the UK government, through the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills, made a consultation in March this year about the implementation of this directive, which is expected to shake really the foundations of consumer redress in this country and across Europe. And the main, this document is available online, so I'm not going to spend much time on it, but just to say that the main key points of this consultation is that the UK government has already expressed their interest in providing, in creating a residual ombudsman body to cover those areas which are not already covered by sector-specific schemes. It will be financed by the government, and they will call a tender for finding a provider. Also, they will create a help desk which will provide information over the phone and online to assist consumers and businesses about certified ADR entities. And long term, there is an expectation that it will help to rationalize and to simplify access to these schemes, which currently are quite dispersed. There is over 70 ADR schemes operating with consumer disputes. Close to the conclusion, I just want to make a brief reference to the ADR regulation, which main purpose is to set a website, which they call the ADR platform, which will be managed by the European Commission and will deal with all e-commerce consumer disputes, will be managed by audio advisors, which will be appointed to by the member states. They will have available complaint forms in all the European languages and link parties to the certified ADR entities. Most importantly, this website, this platform, will enable ADR entities to manage disputes at a distance if they wish to do so. It has a case management tool, and also enables them to use a translation tool, which will have to be in time how effective it is. And these are screenshots of the platform, how it's currently being developed in Brussels. Concluding, we're seeing that at least certainly in the consumer context, there is a clear shift from developing consumer protection, judicial protection mechanisms, to building, to the promotion of audio structures that can ensure the provision of more informal and effective redress for consumers. The Commission is taking a more holistic approach, and obviously this is not the only avenue. They're, as you know, trying to develop also collective redress mechanisms. I think this directive is a great opportunity for revise and promote the consumer ADR landscape in the European Union. As you may be aware, the mediation directive has significant impact across Europe. Maybe not so much in this country, but certainly across Europe. And I think the success of these schemes will depend on a number of issues, but one of them will be to ensure the effective quality control of fair neutral parties as well as providers, particularly once obviously the private industry develops, and also facilitating in developing this audio infrastructure, which is certainly quite challenging to do. And the European platform will facilitate that, at least for those who have got the certification. And also, finally, I think a key element is to convince traders to opt into these schemes as a tool to become a more competitive traders, businesses in the market, and also to ensure the early settlement of meritorious disputes, as well as discouraging unmeritorious ones, and finally ensure that the compliance with final outcomes, settlements, arbitral awards, etc., are done outside the courts. Otherwise, kind of defeats a bit the whole purpose of this system. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to address them now or during the coffee break. Thank you.